Hey everyone, Wolf Lord Rho here. Today we're discussing which of the loyalist Primarchs would reform their legions if they returned to the current Imperium. General spoiler warning to begin, obviously we will be talking events and characters from across the lore, so you have been warned. But with that said, let's just jump straight in. Okay, so for the purposes of this topic, we'll speak about every Primarch who remained loyal to the Emperor during the heresy, regardless of their likelihood to return. So yes, that does mean we will be including Ferrus Manus and Sanguinius. So, going in numerical order, let us begin with the first, Lion L. Johnson. Now, I've spoken a few times regarding the Lion's return before, and I most definitely believe he disappeared before the legions were broken down. And this is due to a comment from Russ in his Primarch novel, The Great Wolf, where he all but basically states it for me, pondering how the Lion would feel about it, because he was, as Russ says, immensely proud of his legion. And personally, I just can't see the Lion agreeing to his legion being broken down, even with the events of Luther's betrayal and Caliban's destruction. Regardless of whether or not he's proud of the legion, which I'm sure he is, the Lion is just a no-nonsense general, a master of warfare. The sheer scale of force a legion represents is just something I can't imagine the Lion would forsake. This is the Primarch who was a hair's breadth from invading Macragge, the Primarch who brought destruction and ruin to all his traitor brothers' homeworlds. With the current state of the Imperium, there's no way he'd be content with just a chapter at his disposal, awakening to find the Imperium on its knees, the traitors running amok, and the galaxy ripped in half. Oh no. Whether he took all the Unforgiven and the new Primaris chapters and just reformed the First Legion outright, or just commanded them as a legion, the Lion would absolutely be bringing the full force of the First Legion back to the Imperium. The fifth Primarch, the Great Khan himself, Jaghatai Khan. Now this is a hard one to figure out, just as the Khan was intended to be. Now Jaghatai did support Guilliman and his plan to break the legions into chapters at the end of the heresy, so obviously that goes a long way into deciding how he may feel upon his return. The question is, would the current state of the Imperium, or more importantly the current state of the White Scars, make him feel any different? And honestly, I think it might. Like Rabute has since doubted whether it was the right decision, I think so too with Jaghatai. Out of all the Primarchs, there are none as willing to admit they made a mistake as Jaghatai. He doesn't place his ego first like many of his brothers, and the real reason I feel he may well think it was a mistake is the state of the White Scars he would return to. They've really been devastated in recent memory. Their chapter master captured and tortured, and now a mind stuck within a broken body. Chogoris itself invaded and brought to the brink of ruin, and still large parts of the system lost to the ruinous powers. This would be something completely unfathomable to Jaghatai. No doubt we would see him unleashing his fury against all the traitor forces, first and foremost. Then once he's done that, would he recall all of his sons? Would he even need to? Let's be real here, any Primarch that returned would be major news for all of his gene line, let alone the rest of the Imperium. They would absolutely come to see it for themselves, whether he called or not. But ultimately, while I'm extremely tempted to say yes, as I think he would be tempted himself, I'm going to say no. Jagatai is a bit like Russ, in that he's quick to anger when pressed, but soon returns to his calmer demeanour. After he'd cleansed the system around Trigoris, I believe he'd at least seek out Guilliman and speak with his brother before deciding his next course. And once the calmer frame of mind came to pass, I'm leaning towards saying he would not refound his legion. The 6th Primarch, Leman Russ. Now, I think I may surprise some people here, but my answer for Russ is going to be no. While it's a bit of a grey area on the exact size of the Space Wolf Great Companies, at least in the current lore, they always used to be assumed to be a fair size larger than the standard Codex 100, and though like the White Scars, they have been up against it like never before, and have suffered significant losses, their actual numbers scattered across the war zones could still be more than most Codex chapters. So Russ could still have a sizable force under his command already. Traditionally, they had no successors, the only attempt previously failing. So the new Primaris chapters within the Ultima founding are something completely new. I don't see Russ calling these chapters to him. I could quite easily see that they would need to prove themselves true sons of Fenris. I don't see him being too happy with Khor's experiments on the whole. Russ was fanatically loyal to the Emperor. Somebody tinkering with his work would be nigh on heresy in his eyes. No, Russ for me would keep the Space Wolves a chapter, at least as much as they already are, until at least the Primaris foundings prove themselves true sons of Fenris. 7th Rogel Dawn. Now I'm sure all you Sons of Dawn are saying an absolute yes, due to the Last Wall Protocol. And you could well be right. But I'm not sure it's that straightforward. Yes, the galaxy is a mess, but Terra isn't directly threatened. It is not under any direct attack, at least at the moment. And Rogel, of all the returning brothers, would want to work with Rabute. He's always held him in high regard. It feels like every conversation he has during the siege, he's mentioning Guilliman's coming. Hold on, Guilliman's on the way. He'd never turn to chaos. And yes, they will disagree in the upcoming scouring, but Dawn will relent at the last. But that will all be water under the bridge when Dawn hits the current timeline, and he sees the traitors on the attack. He and Guilliman would definitely be on the same page. I'm not sure reforming his legion would work for Rabute, despite his own misgivings about his decision. And for that reason, I say no. I don't think Dawn would reform his legion. He's not the lion who wouldn't give a you-know-what about Guilliman's opinion. He would definitely work with Guilliman. The 9th, Sanguinius. So if somehow, some way the angel returned, would he reform the Blood Angels Legion? Now this is quite tricky, because my gut tells me, yes, absolutely. Sanguinius was extremely protective of the Blood Angels' flaw. He felt personally responsible for it, and I think if anything now, he'd feel it even more so, with the effects his death had left on his sons. So not for any real military reason, but simply for his devotion to his sons and wanting to protect them from themselves. I say yes, Sanguinius would reform his legion. And look, while obviously all the sons of Sanguinius would obey, the difficulty I had with it is that there are some fiercely independent successor chapters there. The Flesh Terrors, for example. I really don't think Seth would be happy about losing the identity he has fought so hard to establish. But if anyone could smooth it out, let's be honest, it would be Sanguinius. And as for Guilliman? Look, we've seen in the Unremembered Empire series, Sanguinius is always willing to make personal sacrifices if he believes it's for the best. But we also saw, in no uncertain terms, he will tell Guilliman what he's doing when his mind is made up, whether Guilliman likes it or not. Because for all his charm and charisma, Sanguinius knows there are few, if any, who can stop him. The biggest problem for Sanguinius would not be Guilliman, it'd be the sheer amount of pilgrims chasing him around the galaxy. The 10th, Ferrus Manus. As always with Ferrus, he was lost so early that it could really be anybody's guess. But for me, I think he'd be so disgusted by what's become of his legion, or chapter in this case, that he'd absolutely reform the 10th and mould them back into the fighting force he expected them to be. Eradicate the obsession of augmetics over biology. And really that equally applies to what he'd think of the current situation. He'd be disgusted the Imperium has fallen so far, and his brutal, uncompromising warfare would undoubtedly be crusading across the Imperium. And man, how much could the Imperium benefit from a returned Gorgon, PO'd and unleashing his anger at any and every foe. And as for Guilliman, despite Rabute always looking up to Ferrus, in Ferrus's own words, it is not reciprocated. Manus wouldn't give two hoots about Guilliman's opinion. He would do whatever he wanted. The 18th, Vulcan. Vulcan. Well, it's said Vulcan opposed the initial breaking down of the legions, due to the vast losses his legion had to suffer during the heresy. But I don't see this as a reason for him to reform the Salamander's legion. I actually think he wouldn't. While like all his brothers, he'd be appalled at the state of affairs, I really feel he'd be inclined to work with Guilliman and follow his lead in regards to the strategic overview. Refounding his legion would completely fly in the face of that. Vulcan would not want to disagree with Rabute. He couldn't even bring himself to end Kurz when he had the chance. For all his faults, Vulcan's heart will always remain true. He cares for his brothers. The only way the Salamander's legion would reform is if Guilliman agreed to do it. The 19th, Corax. Corax agreed with Guilliman's view that breaking down the legions was the best way to go, and I don't see him changing his mind if he returned. He and Guilliman always appeared to have one of the better relationships, so I just don't see him wanting to upset the apple cart with such a major action. He saw the logic in Guilliman's plan, and I think he'd stick to it even now. Of course he'd have his doubts, but he would stay true to Guilliman's vision. That's if he'd even be interested in taking command. He could well remain on the lone hunt for Lorgar. The embracing of his warp-given powers certainly seems to have had an effect on the Raven Lord. But that's the lot. So in my opinion, the Lion, Ferrus Manus and Sanguinius would reform their legions. The Khan, Rogel Dawn, Vulcan and Corax would not. Though I admit a couple of those are on the fence, and I wouldn't be too surprised to be wrong. As always, it's just my opinion. As usual guys, what do you think? Which ones do you agree with and which ones do you not? And do you think having a legion reformed would make much difference? As always, leave your thoughts in the comments below, I love to read them. A huge thank you to all my subscribers, your support really means a lot to me, it truly does. And if you're new, please consider subscribing to help the channel grow. And if you enjoyed this particular vid, then why not drop a like on it too. But with that said, I am off, and I'll see you all again real soon.